Hi, this is Carol Kay, and you're listening to Icon Fetch.
Welcome to Icon Fetch, the web's premier music interview show. Now, here's your host, Tony Peters.
Keep rolling, Hite.
Okay, boys, slate. This will be take one, surfing.
Surfing is the only life, the only way for me.
You up.
Welcome to the show. I am Tony Peters. Now, the Beach Boys are the greatest American rock and roll band. Their music is ever present in our culture. I mean, kids of today are as likely to know the words to Surfin USA and Fun, Fun, Fun as Mary Had a Little Lamb. Now, a new collection released by Omnivore Recordings, Becoming the Beach Boys, the complete Hite and Dorinda Morgan sessions, gives us the clearest view into the group's origins. Through demos, rehearsals, multiple takes, and studio chatter, you can hear the Beach Boys gelling as a band, both vocally and musically.
Let's go surfing now, everybody's learning how, come on a safari with me.
To talk about this fantastic new set, we welcome in the owner of Omnivore Recordings, Brad Rosenberger. Brad, good to talk to you. How are you?
Pretty good, Tony. How you doing?
Now, doing well, man. And, you know, if you're a Beach Boy devotee, some of these recordings, some of the people already have. Like, I have a collection called Lost and Found, 61 to 62, but that came out like 25 years ago. So why don't you tell me the origins of this collection where we're gathering pretty much everything that was recorded?
Right. Well, what this project is basically every surviving take from those sessions from September 61 to March of 62, we have put together on 2 CDs. There are 63 tracks, and over 40 of them are previously unissued. And really what you see and you hear is, it's funny, these guys aren't the Beach Boys yet, but their style and their sound is there and intact. And it's incredible to hear the young voices and the in-between song chatter and the innocence. And yet you can hear Brian kind of taking over with the guys. You don't hear much from the control room, just pretty much direction from Brian. So it's a really, I think, a fascinating look at, arguably America's greatest band.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, your record label got to put this out, and that's got to be kind of a coup. How did you work that out where, typically the Beach Boys stuff is on Capitol Records?
Right. Well, these particular recordings are owned by Brother, which is the Beach Boys' parent company, if you will. And I've known some folks over there for years, and we have been talking on and off about trying to figure out ways to work together. And it just seemed right to finally have these recordings out. And for what we do, we're kind of musical curators. It just seemed to be a perfect fit for what this project is and was meant to be. Right.
Now, the liner notes in the booklet says, this compilation produced for release by Brad Rosenberger. So you're the head guy on this. Why don't you explain, like, you wear a lot of hats putting this kind of thing together?
Right. Well, basically in the reissue or the catalog world, a producer is just responsible for all the components that are part of the package. So, everything you see and hear, I had to oversee either with my feedback or my doing something directly. The tapes were mastered and edited together by Mark Lynette, who's a long-standing Beach Boys archivist engineer. And but I oversaw, for example, it was my decision to call the package Becoming the Beach Boys. After the book that was written by Jim Murphy, it was my decision to hire Jim to write the liner notes. And, I worked closely with one of my partners, Greg Allen, on the artwork, and I actually contributed, because I'm a longtime fan and a big collector, a number of the images you see derived from me, and the others derived from Jim. So, yes, I just sort of oversee everything and but at the end of the day, it's sort of my responsibility. It's like, the buck stops here, so to speak. So that's what I did on the project.
Nice. And you talk about the booklet. I mean, you've got a nice essay, like you mentioned, by Jim Murphy. And then there are some really interesting original copies of the, Candix 45s and things like that. What did you bring from your personal collection?
Well, in my collection, I have, I have the Surfer Girl sheet music. I have the X Records version of Surfin'. I have Surfin' Candix 301. There's also Surfin' Candix 331 in there, but I had 301.
Nice.
I also have the Randy Records issue of Barbie and What Is a Young Girl Made Of? And then it was my copy of the Beach Boys' Biggest Hits, which is where these tracks first originated in 1969. So that's what I brought to it. And the rest of the images, the beautiful multicolored Barbie, that was Jim Murphy's. And Jim supplied, the survey and some other images that were in there. So it was kind of like 50-50 between the both of us.
Nice. And I mean, I imagine with running a label like Omnivore, you're up against the digital world where, everything is pretty much downloadable in MP3 or streamed and that kind of thing. But with what you guys doing here, putting a complete package together, you're kind of begging people or kind of, pushing them, like if you get the actual physical copy of this, look at what you get. You get this great booklet and the entire package too.
Right. Well, my partners and myself, we grew up in the physical world, and, there still is a physical audience out there. I mean, that's kind of the great myth that it's all gone bye-bye. It's certainly not what it used to be. But there are still many people out there that not only buy it, but want it in a physical format. And, of course, vinyl has become a huge, it's sort of the soup du jour, but there's so many titles now that are released on vinyl. So, we just I wanted to, as a fan primarily, I kind of wanted to design it with a fan in mind, because I wanted it to be the very best it could be, to tell the story, to hear the story, and to see the story. And so those images of all the records and the collectibles and the sheet music, they were very important to me to include because they're part of the story. And also those are very rare images. So to have photos of them in this booklet, and they're beautiful photos, I think was great. So I'm really proud of it. Absolutely.
Now, we mentioned at the opening of the show that some of this stuff came out on a collection like 25 years ago. Were any of these recordings, did you have to track them down, or pretty much did Brother have it all like stowed away nicely kind of thing?
Well, actually, the people that have control of the physical tapes are the Morgan family.
Okay.
And so, but the Beach Boys have the right to put these tapes out or do what they want with them. So basically, what we had to do is we had to make a deal with Brother, but then I had to go to Palm Springs, which is oddly enough where I am right now on this call, because I just literally dropped the original tapes back off to the Morgan estate.
Wow.
They'd been sitting in my house for like about 3 weeks, and I told the guy that I work with there, Dale Berger, that I said, man, it was great to have them in my house, but I'm so glad I got rid of them now because it made me nervous.
Right, sure.
Because this is really major recorded history.
Right. Well, and you mentioned in the liner notes, it mentions that these tapes were actually in really good shape, right?
Yeah, well, the tape that they used back then, I believe it was 3M, was it lasted longer and it held up really well. It wasn't, I think, until the early 70s when the tapes started to become problematic. But these tapes were in fantastic shape considering how old they are, and the travails that they've gone through over the years and so forth. So it's amazing. It really is. I mean, I'm telling you, looking at them and holding them, it's really it was impressive.
Yeah, I mean, this is the genesis of the Beach Boys there, and you're holding it in your
Yep.
hand. And I mean, it's amazing because most of the stuff on this new collection is recorded in a studio, but you have a couple of examples of even before that, which is just mind-blowing. Like the Beach Boys recording in a living room? Is that what this?
Right. Well, the whole story is detailed in Jim's liner notes in the package, but when the boys first hooked up with the Morgans had a setup in their home, which is where they recorded some demos, and then ultimately the Morgans had a more professional studio in Hollywood, and that's where they did that. But yeah, it's the Morgans kind of like were literally a little mom and pop organization. They had a recording studio, they had a publishing company, and they were very local. Back then, regional records were very big and plentiful in the rock and roll business, and they found a small label named Candix Records that was interested enough to put their first record out.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think one of the myths that this kind of distills is that the Beach Boys weren't very polished. I mean, even listening to the guys in the living room there, I mean, it's obviously these guys are rehearsed. They're not just throwing this together,
right. Right. Well, there are some, I guess you could call them bootleg tapes or whatever, but that have been in the collector's market for years. And then they definitely were practicing before they came in.
Right.
And you don't just pop those arrangements together overnight. But the fact of the matter is that nobody was over 20 years old. Carl Wilson was 15 years old. They were all super young, and you can tell that these arrangements are already there in place for what they would re-record the big songs from this. Well, not Surfin', but Surfin' Safari and Surfer Girl were ultimately re-recorded when they got to Capitol Records and became big hits and big productions. But the sound is there. The arrangement is there. It's not wildly different. There are some lyrics that have been changed in the Capitol versions, but it's all there. And I just think it's remarkable because when you're listening to it, they're really not the Beach Boys yet. In fact, some of the early sessions, they were recorded and they hadn't even been named the Beach Boys yet. So that sound was there from an early time. I think that was amazing.
Absolutely.
To do that.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the tracks that really is mind-blowing is Lavender, because you think, oh, well, the Beach Boys went along and then they added that kind of four freshman sound. And no, I mean, again, that was there from the beginning.
You'll see her standing in the dim twilight.
I was there from the beginning, and I think the multiple takes of Lavender are particularly interesting in this collection because you see them try to pull it together, and those were intricate harmonies, and Brian had done that, figured that out all by himself.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think if there's one thing that's apparent is that Brian, even at this early stage in their career, he was already leading things,
Look at your paper. Look at your paper like this. Just look at your paper.
Look at the
all
words.
Right, here we go.
Only sing it.
1 and 2.
Right. Absolutely. And that's, as you say, that's one of the more interesting things of this package is just it was there from the get-go.
Now, there's a couple of really curious things in addition to sort of the songs that people know or are familiar with. I mean, you have Kenny and the Cadets. Can you kind of explain that? Because that's not really the Beach Boys, but it sort of is. What was going on there?
Right. Well, in February, March of '62, the Morgans had, I guess, to take advantage of the Barbie doll phase. They had these songs, in particular, the first one was called Barbie, and they had them recorded. And I don't really know what the real story was, if they had found other artists, that it just didn't work. But they went to the boys, and they asked if Brian and, what ended up being Brian, Carl, Al Jardine and Audrey Wilson, the Wilsons' mother. And they end up singing on this song, this record, where it was already pre-recorded. All the boys did, and the mom was just do the vocals.
Barbie, Barbie, queen of the brave.
They put it out as a single. It was called Barbie, but to take advantage of that, they named the group Kenny, as in Barbie and Ken. Kenny and the Cassettes.
Right.
And it was as simple as that, even though it sounds like a strange story. It was pretty much as simple as that.
Well, and it's interesting because you can hear Brian's falsetto,
Right.
just right there, totally intact. Like, wow, there it is in the early days, too, you know?
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's not necessarily, obviously Brian didn't write it, and it's not a Beach Boys, but you hear that that beautiful young falsetto is there, dead on.
And Barbie, my Barbie, you only me.
Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up real quick was you've got a couple of overdub things that are really kind of like, what? Like on Surfer Girl, all of a sudden you're listening to one of the takes and there's a girl singing. Like, what was going on with that?
Well, we don't know the true answer to that. We found it on the tape, and we felt that it was interesting to include. There's also a demo recording of What Is a Young Girl Made Of, where it's, again, a singer that we don't know who it is.
What is a young girl made of? Sugar and spice, they say.
But sounds like it was, the demo recording made for somebody else.
Right.
And, we haven't cleared up all the mysteries of the early Beach Boys years, but we did find some things that were, very unique that hadn't been released before that we felt were important to the package.
Right, and then there's one more. There's an overdub session that was done for Surfin' Safari as well.
Let's go surfing now, everybody's learning now. Come on a safari with me. Come on a safari with me. Huntington and Malibu, they're shooting the pier. At Rincon, they're walking the nose.
And I'm not even,
Right.
It doesn't even really sound like that's the Beach Boys like in the other channel, perhaps. Like, I don't know.
Oddly enough, that's my favorite crazy, 8-ball version there. It's apparently what happened after the Beach Boys had recorded Surfin' Safari, and it appears that it happened after they were signed to Capitol and actually re-recorded it for Capitol. But what ended up happening was is that apparently Hite Morgan hired some musicians, a drummer and a guitar player, I believe, to overdub on top of the existing track. What's crazy about it is it doesn't even sound like it's in rhythm.
No, not at all.
It sounds like a train wreck to me.
It really does.
We're going on safari to the islands this year, so if you're coming, get ready to go. We're gonna come on faithfully ways.
And then this thing turned out it was licensed to Areola Records in Germany. And it came out, it's just, it's a train wreck, but it's just, again, another fascinating thing. And also, it leads you an understanding why Brian Wilson fought so hard to be a producer in those early years, because, people were taking his music and doing things to it that they shouldn't have been doing.
I got the solution, you guys. Can I do this without the bass this time? Dub the bass with our voices next time? Huh? He says no.
And ultimately, Brian does get to be, it was it's really a remarkable story. Somebody that young at that particular time in the music business to be in complete control of the records. And when you listen to the Surfer Girl album, which I believe was the first album that he produced, in name, it's unbelievable. It's genius. That's an overused word when it comes to him, but I do think it applies.
Absolutely. And you're listening to these early recordings here. it's a long way from Pet Sounds and Smile and all that other kind of stuff. But I mean, we're at least hearing the genesis of this too, which is really amazing too. So,
yeah, I mean, think about it. From Surfin to Smile is basically 5 years.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
That's unbelievable.
It really is mind blowing. Wow, that's cool. So, well, let me ask you real quick. Running Omnivore, you guys have got some other really cool things coming up, and it's interesting. I was checking out the website, and it looked like perhaps your very first release on Omnivore was a Big Star release, and now you're going back and doing this big box set, right?
Right. Our very first release was the test pressing edition of Big Star Third. It was done on vinyl, and it was our very first release, which was released on Record Store Day in April of 2011. We are now releasing the complete Big Third sessions. So it's put together all the little loose ends, plus a lot of extra things that we found. My partner, Shel Pavelski, produced that set, and it's I think there's 69 or 70 tracks on the record, and I think about 30 of them are previously unissued.
Wow.
And we're equally as proud of that one as well. I think it's going to blow a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got an NRBQ box set coming out. I love those guys.
NRBQ, yeah. It's for some reason these things all kind of coalesce at the same time, but we're very excited about that as well. So.
Fantastic. All right, give everybody the web address where they can find out more. Right? What's your web address for Omnivore?
Yeah, it's www.omnivorerecordings.com. Remember, it's recordings and not records. People sometimes get that confused.
No, that's all right. Excellent. So, well, great. Well, Brad, it's been great talking to you. Good luck. The brand new collection is Becoming the Beach Boys, the complete Hite and Dorinda Morgan sections. And we can't wait to hear some more stuff from Omnivore, too. Take care, man.
Very good. Thank you very much.
There's several little independent record labels that are still fighting the good fight, and Omnivore Recordings is one of them. We've interviewed Vicki Peterson of the Bangles recently about the Rarities collection. That came out on Omnivore. There's a Lone Justice collection, Peter Case, the Jellyfish remasters, Humble Pie. These are all examples of CDs that we've reviewed, and you can read more at Icon Fetch. Well, there's a lot of albums being released in the next few weeks in anticipation of the holiday season. So keep it tuned here and keep checking back at the website for more great interviews and reviews. Until next time, I'm Tony Peters. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Icon Fetch with Tony Peters. Want more great interviews? Head over to iconfetch.com. There, you'll find every interview we've ever done, plus CD reviews, This Day in Music, and a random album of the day. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Who is Tony going to interview next? It could be you. Send what you've got to Tony Peters. Icon Fetch, P.O. Box 292134, Dayton, Ohio 45429. Or email Tony at host@iconfetch.com. Until next time, this is Joe Kelly. Have a great day.